With legal marijuana sales weeks away, is Ohio ready? Welcome to Columbus on the Record. Recreational marijuana sales could start in about a month. A state legislative rulemaking committee this week cleared the way for existing medical marijuana dispensaries to sell recreational marijuana. The facilities must apply to sell marijuana to anyone over 21. While state officials won't say how long it will take to approve those applications, backers of the legalization effort expect those approvals to come quickly. Julie Carr-Smythe, this is moving quickly, fairly seamlessly. Is this a surprise to people at the State House?
I think it is a little bit of a surprise. But once it was sort of decided that compromise legislation from last year was not going to fly, I think the idea to just let it take its course through the rulemaking process, which is dull and boring and doesn't really, cause many waves. I think that is what happened. And then they put over it a guy named Jim Canepa, who's been known to do very efficient work in other parts of his life. So I think that he came in and is, as he said, he has a small but mighty staff, and he's just trying to meet all the deadlines as the Constitution requires.
Terry, you think that, because there are a lot of people who are strongly opposed to this in the state government, that they might have thrown up a few regulatory roadblocks here and there, but we haven't seen that.
We haven't seen it, but my sources at the State House make real clear this is very much a work in progress, because there's a lot of issues and questions on content levels, advertising, impact to children. And remember, the people that pushed this marijuana thing said they wanted to be regulated like alcohol. Well, alcohol is very heavily regulated, and all those kind of things of how it's sold and how it's marketed are all key questions. So not so fast, where it might not be as quick as some think.
But Joe, once they start sales, now you could tweak the advertising and things like that, but the content and the strength, it's going to be hard to to put that back in the bottle.
Yeah, one thing that I have noted is that the direction that we're going, and with the, I think, governor's blessing, it's really sort of a copy of what has been happening in Colorado and certainly in our neighbor up north, where you have a ban on public consumption because, you can have the smoke drifting over and that sort of a thing. But I have a feeling that essentially what we're doing is we're copying that model.
And there's still a lot of issues, like in the workplace. If you're an employer, can you test somebody? Because if you don't test and exercise some care, somebody's operating a heavy machine, a vehicle, they have a crash, guess who gets blamed? It's the employer. So there's still a lot of issues to work out. The details are important.
I don't think that we're done by long shot. I think Terry's right. Even just the rulemaking, this rulemaking that went through this week is for the license applications. Then they actually have to still set up the entire program that says how to approve those and who gets them, and a lot of that is already in the amendment, but they'll have to have rules on those as well.
Yeah, and Terry is right, and I think that private industry, and for that matter, state government, can certainly prohibit the use in the workplace. And if there is an accident or something like that, they'll handle it just like they do with alcohol. They'll test the individual.
The employer doesn't want to get sued and have to pay millions because they failed to test or failed to throw out a bad employee.
We get used to it with alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, there are airplane pilots that have been known to fly drunk.
And alongside this, of course, is the effort at the federal level to delist marijuana, which would probably make things easier for states that are legalizing like this.
47, last count, 47 communities in Ohio have said no dispensaries in our community. Is that a high number, a low number? Are we surprised by that number?
Well, I think one of the surprises is there aren't that many in central Ohio.
There are hardly any. Marysville is it.
Absolutely. And Marysville's kind of in central Ohio, but not exactly. So the regional differences are fascinating, but I think there's a lot of communities that might not realize they have some power to say no if they want to say no.
Why do you think, Joe, that central Ohio is reluctant to say no to dispensaries, communities here?
I think we're more liberal, and I don't mean this just in a political sense. I think just being a college town and the type of population. We have a very young population. I don't think that Columbus and immediate central Ohio would be interested in that. But even the numbers statewide are relatively low. I think it's like 2% of communities versus, and by the way, again, Michigan allows this as well, and I think 40% of their communities have some sort of a ban.
And the amendment did provide some incentives. If you allow the dispensaries, you get a little bit of a kickback, right?
That's right.
That's the other thing. Is this moving quickly because the state wants the money? They get 10% of the sales. It's tax money sitting there. Sales tax or income tax revenues are down a little bit, a couple of months this year.
I don't know that. I think actually there's dysfunction at the State House. I don't see, this as the desire they have to move super quickly as much as to stop it would take a lot of cooperation that I haven't seen down there.
And I'm going to shock you, the House and the Senate have different priorities. They each want to fix and fine-tune the marijuana laws, but they're on different planets or different worlds in terms of where they focus and what they do.
Joe, we reported this week that basically the state has to retire all of their canine, all their drug dogs, because the dogs were trained to sniff out marijuana and other drugs, and now you get a false positive on a drug if they smell marijuana and it's now legal. So they have to have new dogs.
Well, we shouldn't be reporting on this because I was going to use that as a defense argument next time I filed a motion to suppress. You shouldn't have searched my client's car carrying 50 pounds of cocaine because what he actually smelled was the marijuana. Yeah. I don't know that they'll have to retire them, but I think that the arguments will be there.
Yeah. All right, we'll see how that. You mentioned there's still some rulemaking to go, Julie.
Right.
Is mid-June still optimistic?
Well, the Cannabis Association folks are ready to go. They said they're working simultaneously as this process is moving so that as soon as they can. So if the applications are ready by June 1st, maybe some are approved by mid-month.
And stores are already operating.
Right, and the stores are already operating. So.
Yeah. All right. Then the parking problems and the traffic jams for the first week anyway, they come to fruition here as it has happened in other states. Anyway, the power struggle among leaders of the state teachers' retirement system has landed in court. This week, Attorney General Dave Yost filed suit to remove 2 of the members of the STRS board. He claims Wade Steen and Rudy Fichtenbaum are not operating in the best interest of the 500,000 teachers and retirees in the system. The critics claim the men are too closely aligned with a firm that wants to control about 70% of the system's $90 billion. Critics of the move say the firm, QED, lacks experience managing pension fund investments. Supporters of the move and the firm argue that STRS investments have underperformed, which is why retirees have had limited cost of living increases in the past few years. The board this week stood by the embattled members. Terry Casey, if the teachers who vote on STRS elections and the board says we want to go in this direction, why should the Attorney General and the governor get involved?
Well, one of the questions, having read the 14-page anonymous thing supposedly from a staffer or staffers at STRS, and then reading the brief that was filed in court, it's rather vague and unclear as far as who did what and that kind of thing. But this is kind of like, if you remember from TV days, the show Family Feud, and it's all about money because there's big differences because teachers feel correctly for the amount of money they're putting in, they're not getting a cost of living, but then it gets complicated in terms of investments, cost of operating, and the good news is teachers live longer, so you need more money. So there's more to come, and in June, the Retirement Study Council involving legislators is going to look more at it. There's more meetings, there's questions whether there's going to be firings, cuts in the staff, changing to index funds, which are less costly, might return more than what the staff has done.
This comes down to, Julie, the anger by teachers that they haven't gotten those cost of living increases. They feel like the funds have been underperforming.
Right. I believe that, since 2012, they've had 2 COLAs to adjustments, a 1% and a 3%. And over that time, I was just researching this today. The prices have risen 27%.
Yeah.
So they are struggling. I interviewed a couple of teachers at the meeting this week, and they say they counted on this, that it was promised. Now I guess that's a matter of debate, but that they have supported these so-called reformers because they feel like people aren't listening to them and taking them into account.
Joe, how do you prove that two people are not acting in the best interest of the pension fund to remove them from the board? That's a pretty dramatic step.
Yeah. How about that? I think you make the allegation. You try to perhaps bring some comparisons from other funds or whatever. But Terry is absolutely correct. I think that the allegations are vague. Are they going to add any meat to the bones in this thing? I don't know that they'll be successful. But boy, this story is a lot more interesting than it should be. I mean, really.
Now, which begs the question, is there something similar happening at OPERS or at the State Highway Patrol pension system or the police and fire pension system?
Well, all of them have challenges because 10, 20, 30 years ago, they misestimated how long people would live, when people retire, and also, particularly in the teachers, a few decades back, they estimated the growth in number of teachers would be a lot higher than what it's been. And then the pay increases have gone up for teachers, but they haven't gone up as much as they thought. So there's been a lot of miscalculations, but a lot of it's the questions of whether the staff is overpaid with too many bonuses when the stock market doesn't perform well. So there's a lot of legitimate questions there, and again, this is a story that we're going to be talking about in the future.
And Terry is correct, because one of the things that was happening is that the managers were getting paid bonuses if their investments exceeded expectations or projections, even though the money wasn't being given to the teachers first.
And we have this added, twist to all this, that the Attorney General launched an investigation into the board last week, filed a lawsuit just only a few days later, and his representative represents the board at the meeting. And so there were some fireworks over that as well. Like, now how can we trust your judgment? You're investigating us, you're suing us, and now you're advising us. Yeah. And so it's a tricky spot to be in.
And a person who was at the meeting when this alternative investment, supposedly more creative, was presented, and it was shot down big time by the board back then. And there's a whole lot of other questions as far as whether this meets any standards that would pass muster.
And let's not forget that the AG may have to name someone from the AG's office to represent the guys who are being sued. How much is
the animosity towards teachers and teachers' unions, how much is that playing into this?
I think that isn't the factor. It's really an argument. It's typical. It's about money and a feeling that we're left behind, because if you look at teachers, they're putting in 14%. They're required to work longer. The employer's putting in 14%, but yet with other retirement systems, they're paying in less, but kind of getting more. But it's complicated.
A couple of people I interviewed, retired teachers are saying they feel like this is sort of a pattern with the governor's administration, that they've approved vouchers, a very sweeping voucher program that allows private schools to take some of that money. They have moved the Department of Education into the cabinet and gotten rid of some of the bipartisanship that used to be there, and that this is sort of another piece of that. I mean, I've heard other people say not at all, that this QED is just simply a very dangerous thing that could tank the fund.
Yeah, so don't have a whole lot of track record. They want basically 70% of the retirement money.
And they claimed they had a couple people from Ontario and Canada who had been doing this successfully, but Canada's laws are different from here, and then apparently those people in Canada that were claimed to be part of it never were a part of it. So there's a lot of questions as the shells were moved, what's under there or not.
It's just a power struggle and a lot of money involved. $90 billion is what is involved in this one fund. Anyway, we are 6 months away from Election Day, and the polls show Democrats have some work to do. A New York Times poll shows President Biden trailing former President Trump in 5 of the 6 swing states Biden won in 2020. Former President Trump is on trial, meanwhile, in New York City for paying hush money to hide a sexual encounter with a porn star. The parade of would-be Trump running mates making their way to the courtroom this week included Ohio Senator J.D. Vance.
I'm here for the simple reason to show support for a friend. I think this trial is absolutely ridiculous. I think it's a sham prosecution. And I think that luckily the president's supporters should know that he's actually in great spirits despite the circumstances of this. He should be out on the campaign trail, but of course he's here with this trial.
Vance had a very different take in 2016 when the alleged hush money plan was underway and the Access Hollywood tape surfaced. Then Vance tweeted, quote, "Fellow Christians, everyone is watching us when we apologize for this man. Lord help us." Vance deleted that tweet and now says he was wrong about Trump in 2016. Terry Casey, how goes the audition for J.D. Vance to be VP?
Well, I'm going to shock you that occasionally politicians aspire to bigger offices, like maybe vice president. And in Columbus, there's this week some people cheering Vance on to be vice president because then Mike DeWine would appoint his successor to the U.S. Senate, and there's a clogged potential Republican primary coming up in 2026. So there's all kind of layers of machination in this. But again, politicians seeking higher office, that's kind of normal.
There's politicians seeking high office, and then there's politicians shamelessly seeking higher office. Does this fall into that category?
It's in the eye of the beholder, but again, politicians being politicians, you should never be surprised.
Well, in this beholder's eye, I just couldn't believe what I was watching on TV of members of Congress, members of the Senate, sitting in the front row of this trial. I mean, I have a rather conservative view of the role of the courts and how that procedure ought to go forward. And then dressing in costume. I guess we all know how we're going to dress next Halloween, but it's...
Which is the red tie.
And the red
dark
tie
suit.
and the blue suit. I thought it was absolutely over the top. Quite frankly, I thought it was shameful, and I'm sorry to have experienced it.
It's against the backdrop that obviously President Trump is under a gag order, and he's had a difficult time not speaking out for this long period of time. I guess it's going to be a 6-week trial. So they supposedly are coming there to keep the momentum going for him while he can't really speak about the injustices of what he's going through.
But why in the setting of outside the courtroom? They could be doing that down in Miami, Florida, or in Nashville, Tennessee, or in Anchorage, Alaska.
All the cameras are there, so that's one thing, I guess. Plus, they get to stand right behind Donald Trump when he does his hallway news conference, and there's no cameras in that courtroom, but he's certainly...
And Terry's right. I mean, it's an audition. Yeah, I get that. I just thought it was a...
Yeah.
And there's another wrinkle this afternoon on MSNBC. John Kasich, who said he was for Biden, was talking this afternoon about how he's hearing from Democrats the continued push to get Biden off the ballot. So again, I'm not saying that will happen. I'm just saying the twisted tangle of politics has lots of creativity to it.
The New York Times poll had some, you could say, good news for Sherrod Brown. They looked at the races in Michigan and Pennsylvania in particular, and where Biden was not doing as well as the Democratic Senate candidates there. There was a lot of ticket splitters, Julie, in these states, according to this poll. So that has to be good news for Sherrod Brown, because his fear is that Biden will drag his campaign down.
We can't drag him down because he's not on our ballot. But,
anyway.
but I mean, this is part of the issue is that I think Sherrod is a known quantity in Ohio and views himself as sort of a top of the ticket. So how much he wants to campaign with an unpopular president is a good question.
And the follow-up on that comment, I picked up from a very good State House source that Democrats might now be switching to the view of let's not have Biden on the Ohio ballot because that'll slow down the Trump-type voters voting for Bernie Moreno. So there's questions of whether if Biden's on or off the ballot, whether that helps Sherrod or not against Bernie.
Very complicated. Bernie Moreno was the subject of a New York Times piece this week, Joe. His family immigrated from Colombia when he was 5 or 6 years old. He was very young.
Little.
And he says they came here with nothing, and the New York Times article indicated he may have stretched the truth a little bit. They came here certainly with nothing, but not as much as they had in Colombia.
That's right. What happened in his case is that, and in a different situation than in my family's case, because we came from a country that prohibited you from taking any resources out. They came from a country that you can do whatever you want with your investments. But the family is extremely well connected. His brother, I understand, was Colombian ambassador to the United States. The father's family is connected politically as well. Both the father and the mother had degrees and advanced degrees from American universities, Stanford and University of Pennsylvania. So they came in hyper prepared. So they didn't come with just a suitcase and $5 in their pocket. But that's the only criticism. Yeah. I mean, aside from that, I mean, Bernie Moreno's story is pretty remarkable.
Imagine a politician saying, "I'm just a common person."
Well, and Bernie Moreno's being attacked as a car dealer, and the question is, between a longtime career politician and a car dealer, which low of lower is lowest is an interesting...
Kerry's referring to a new Sherrod Brown ad where he resurfaces all of Bernie Moreno's TV car ads, where he's saying, "Here, check out this car," you know, sort of we're dealing type ads.
And I sure hope that none of my money went to that ad. I watched that ad, and quite frankly, I said, is this an attack ad, or is this a Bernie Moreno ad?
It was interesting. You mentioned we're 6 months out, and, you know, this was sort of, I think, the first attack ad I've seen from Sherrod. He's done an awful lot of positive, you know, ads that were touting programs he helped with and bills and people he helped, and now he must be thinking that it's time to switch it over.
But I'm going to predict they've done a lot of testing in the car ad. They're not done with negative ads because Sherrod Brown's people have always been very creative and interesting and funny in terms of the ads. So there's going to be a lot more, and it's actually only 5.5 months we've got to suffer through, but it's a long ways off.
Let's get to our last topic. With all the talk of what Intel, Amazon, Facebook, and Google bring to Central Ohio, there is another side. They need a lot of electricity to run their factories and data centers. AEP has told the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio the high-tech facilities could double the demand for its electricity in Central Ohio. AEP has asked the PUCO for permission to basically require these data centers to pay for 10 years of electricity up front, even if they don't use it. AEP says the guarantees would allow the utility to build new transmission lines to power these facilities. Joe Mas, is it worth it? I mean, that's a lot of electricity.
You know what? Yes, and I do think it's worth it. It costs money to make money. I think that the development of infrastructure makes a difference. And what I do like about it is that they're asking the actual consumer, the business who's going to be making the money, to spend the money up front. And I think 10 years, yeah, I think that's probably okay.
Any indication that, because some big companies ask for a deal, they ask for lower electric rates for their facilities.
Yeah, I don't know. They have gotten some pretty good deals to come here to begin with, and so I'm not sure. I don't have any inside information as far as what they might do with that, but I can understand from AEP's standpoint, because if they have to provide this incredibly larger amount of power, then they're going to have to be ready for it.
Yeah. These data centers in particular, manufacturing facilities are different, but the data centers, they don't employ a whole lot of people, Terry.
No, they don't. And then there's crypto mining. There's all kind of uses of the electricity. The problem is Ohio is part of a 13-state grid that stretches from Chicago to D.C., New Jersey, et cetera, into Michigan. But how are we going to generate the power? Because we're on a ticking time clock from the Biden administration that in 11 years we've got to be at 100% green energy, and this particular grid is heavily focused on gas generated and nuclear, and I don't think we can switch. So can we produce the power in the future? Because you've both got to generate it minute by minute, and you got to transport it to the plant where it's needed, and there's homeowners who want air conditioning in the summer.
Facebook had said all of their power for their data centers would be renewables. I'm not sure where they are on that promise, but that's what they've said back, I think, in 2021.
Great idea.
Yeah.
It's a thing that they need to talk about in terms of their corporate identity, because you come into a place like this and, you know, there are a lot of negatives. There are people who get displaced. There are, you know, environmental impacts and that kind of thing. And so you want to be saying, you know, there are positives that far outweigh the negatives when you bring in a place like this.
Yeah, we haven't even started talking about water needs for the Intel project. That's a huge issue in Licking County, and one of the reasons why they chose Ohio.
And no
Midwest, we get plenty of water.
But the good news is we don't have earthquakes here, so that's a big part of the reason they put it here.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. And Joseph Moss, you're up first.
Thank you. And I have a prediction. And I have an extraordinary rate of prediction of 50-50. So, but my prediction, actually, I'm counting on this one. J.D. Vance will not be Trump's running mate. J.D. Vance has nothing to bring to the table. He's an Ohio guy. It's going to be either Tim Scott or a yet-to-be-determined female.
Okay. Terry.
This week, the Intel CEO was in Columbus and made a speech, and from somebody who's there told me it was fascinating because said this plant's not just going to produce chips, it's going to be the chips that are more AI focused, and that kind of super sophisticated fast chip is the kind of thing that Cleveland Clinic is using to figure out customized ways for each person to get the cancer cures. So the fascinating technology, medical, it all ties together, could be a great future.
Okay. Julie.
I'll be watching this coming week. We have a big decision expected in the one of the big abortion cases down in Cincinnati over the fetal cardiac activity ban, which is really the most sweeping of Ohio's restrictions. Opponents following last year's vote have been chipping away at a lot of these laws, because each one has to be challenged in court. And so I'll be watching that closely on Monday.
All right. We talked about the polls done by the New York Times this week. Well, 35 years ago today, on May 17th, 1988, the New York Times poll had Michael Dukakis beating then-President George H.W. Bush by 10 percentage points. We all know how that turned out. The president beat Dukakis by 7 points in November. So take May polls with a grain of salt. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the conversation on Facebook. And you can watch us anytime on our website, wosu.org/COTR. You can also catch us on YouTube and the PBS video app. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.